was America the closest to any civilization since when the Hebrews left Egypt to have that as you mentioned, I think a covenant form of government. Can you explain kind of what the covenant form of government is, and is America the closest that has come to that since?
Yeah, so the pharaohs of Egypt controlled everything: the cattle, the land, the people. And around 1400 BC is when Israel comes out of Egypt. And lo and behold, for 400 years, they have no king. And this system was downloaded at one time to Moses on Mount Sinai. And it involves every single person being taught the law and every person personally accountable to God to follow the law. And so you're about to steal, there's nobody around, and then you think, God's watching me. He wants me to be fair. He's going to hold me accountable in the future. Maybe I should hesitate stealing. And it creates something in your head called a conscience. If everybody believes this, you can maintain complete order with no police. And so there was no police in ancient Israel. Everybody was taught the law. Everybody helped enforce the law.
That's wild to think about.
And you had, right? I love, so Leviticus 19:18 says, love your neighbor as yourself. The verse right before it says, confront your neighbor directly so you will not be held guilty for their sin. Another translation says, rebuke your neighbor for their sin openly so you will not incur their guilt upon you. So they're loving each other, but they're correcting each other, right? It's a self-policing system. And so they were able to maintain order with no centralized government. And the word synagogue means meeting house. And so they would gather together and they would elect their city elders. And then I put together a book called Who is the King in America? And I go through about a dozen different things to show how unique Israel was. One is they were the first nation with private land ownership. You see, wherever there's a king, you never really own the land. It's always conditional of you staying on the nice side of the king. You cross the king, he'll take away the land and kill you. In ancient Israel, the land was permanently titled to each family. If you got in a pinch and sold it, every 50 years it reverted back to the family. Now, if you own land, you can accumulate stuff. The Bible called that being blessed. And you can give away some of your stuff. The Bible called it charity. And it's interesting. Lenin said socialism is a transition phase to communism. And Marx said communism can be summed up in one sentence: abolition of private property. All right. So if you don't own anything, how can you be charitable? How can you give away what you don't have? What are you going to steal from somebody, break the law? No, God entrusts you with stuff and then gives you opportunities to show on the outside the love of God that's on the inside. There's a lot more there. Israel's the first nation with no prisons. When a crime was committed, you immediately got the accused and the elders to the city gates, and you had the trial right then, a city of refuge that they could run away to. But like in Egypt, they could throw somebody in jail like Joseph for years. They didn't do that in Israel. In Israel, every man was armed. These other countries, the peasants, they weren't armed. The king had an army, but in ancient Israel, every man was in the army. Every man was in the militia, and they were armed with a sword upon their thigh and ready at a moment's notice to defend their wife and kids and community.
Okay.
Israel was the first nation that could read. Only 1% of Egypt could read. Reading and writing was the scribes' secret knowledge. The scribes actually kept the hieroglyphs complicated on purpose as job security. They were needed as a class to interpret these complicated things. When Moses, and they had 3,000 of them. Sumeria had 1,500 cuneiform characters. China had 10,000 Chinese characters. Imagine teaching those to your kids, right? It was only for court records, only for kings and scribes. So when Moses came down the mountain, he didn't just have the law. He had the law in a 22-character alphabet. First letter's Aleph, second letter Beth. Sound familiar? It's so easy to learn, kids could learn it. So ancient Israel was the first nation where everybody, even the children, could read. And so they not only could read and knew the law, they helped enforce the law. And so, again, it was a system that was empowering the individual And then each individual was personally accountable to God. So if you're all by yourself and you open your mouth and you make a vow unto the Lord, they actually believed God was right there and God heard their vow and they were bound by that vow. And so this is a system, and it worked until the priests stopped teaching the law and every man did what was right in their own eyes.